kind of mysterious. You gotta run these machines. They're gonna create heat. They're gonna create noise, and there's this real kind of process to it that's really different than printing money at a giant, central bank printing press, right?
Yeah.
It's own kind of operation that's got its own flavor.
Yeah, and it's evolved because Bitcoin is so valuable. People value Bitcoin so much that they've basically worked to create these specialized computers that cost like $10,000 each one in order to be like the best computer for mining Bitcoin. I mean, when Bitcoin first came out, you could just mine it on your laptop. That I wish I was into it then, right? But it's really, the fact that people value it so much has generated an entire industry devoted to mining it, similarly to how gold did.
Yeah. And that's okay. So this brings me to the gold comparison. So you were saying earlier that, people do compare it to gold, but you don't seem to compare it to gold. Is that accurate?
Well, it's comparable. I kind of think about it in terms of, a new monetary technology that builds on some features that gold had, or has some features that gold had, but also builds on them a little, or builds on it a little bit. Similarly, kind of like in the evolution of different types of money, you had seashells, beads, silver, whatever, gold, then gold kind of won.
My love for shining gold is such that I could never have too much. I wish that everything I touch would turn to gold, gold, gold.
Then you have dollars, bad, right? And now we have Bitcoin, right? In terms of, technological properties. And so Bitcoin is like gold in that it's more scarce than dollars, and that, it's a way you can store your wealth in gold and be confident that the government's not going to print more gold, right? And so those are some powerful similarities between the two. But Bitcoin improves upon gold in that it's very easy to transfer value across space with Bitcoin. Very hard to transfer value across space with gold, right? Yes. It's very hard for me to mail you a gold brick, right? Yeah. So with gold, you can, store your value across time, knowing that it's not going to be, debased or diluted or whatever, or that it's less likely to be. But, and you can do the same thing with Bitcoin, but it's really transferring value across space where Bitcoin improves upon gold. And then also the fact that Bitcoin is, the Bitcoin network is decentralized and largely immutable, and that you can't change Bitcoin, right? Is actually in the modern day, an advantage it has to gold because, gold is awesome, but it can be basically, governments can collect all the gold, right? And it's easier to censor gold transactions, even though it's harder than with, digital fiat currency. It's easier for governments to kind of censor gold. And it's really one way that gold kind of failed in that, in 1933, the reason AIER was founded, governments just said, no more gold. We're going to confiscate it all, right?
Executive order by FDR, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. Gold Depository at Fort Knox, commonly known as the Gold Vault, or I prefer Gold Fortress, was constructed in the late 30s. During the 1930s, we were in the Great Depression. President Roosevelt decided the only way to bring the economy out of its situation was for the government to control the money, the manufacturing of the money. In 1933, President Roosevelt signed the Gold Act, which basically made it illegal for people to own gold. People turned in their gold coins and things of that sort, and the government melted them down into gold bars weighing approximately 27.5 pounds.
It would be a lot more challenging for governments to confiscate all the Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's monetary qualities improve upon gold's in a few ways. And then also, many people consider scarcity to be important with money, and Bitcoin is more scarce than gold. Gold is, the supply grows around 2% roughly annually because, miners are mining it, right? But Bitcoin's supply is actually fixed, right? There will only be approximately 21 million Bitcoin in the world. So if you value scarcity with your money, Bitcoin is more scarce than gold.
And why could or should people value scarcity?
Yeah, I think that, over time we've seen that people like to store their wealth in scarce assets. That's something that, value is subjective, and say there was a small town, we were like on an island or something, we had 100 units of money, and, we were trading with that money. And because there were only 100 units, every time we produced more like capital goods, right? We got more productive. The purchasing power of those units increased, right? Along with kind of, society getting more productive.
Yes.
And then when you jack those units up to 200, right? From 100 to 200, then, our purchasing power, the purchasing power of each unit goes down, right? And so, having a scarce money kind of allows us to store our wealth in something that is, kind of allows that asset to grow as we grow more productive. And, the purchasing power of that asset can't be diluted by supply increases. Is a roundabout way of explaining it.
That's a great explanation, actually. And so it's kind of like, growing in conjunction with the social process and the technological process, and how, how exchanges are actually happening with people. And rather than being something that you can manipulate, and we see that now when we're looking at inflation, when we're looking at, what caused inflation, when we're looking at also the supply issues, when we're looking at the money printing, when we're looking at all of these other factors that don't have to do with really the actual productivity and growth and technological advancements that, that we've been making as citizens, right? It's just kind of, you could see that there's a disconnect, is what I mean to say, between the fiat currency and between how people are living and how they're producing and consuming.
Yeah. And it's really intuitive. Like the example I just gave, I could probably give to a 5-year-old, right? And then you ask that same 5-year-old is probably wondering, well, wait, why do things just keep getting more expensive, right? And then you have to explain central banking and inflation to them and why people like say that that's good, right? And it's just, it gets crazy, right?
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing, basically.
Yeah, they would probably not, they would say, well, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense,
Yeah, and you're like, well, it's a tough world, 5-year-old, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
It's very, very special because if you can see, the numbers all go to 11. Look, right across the board. 11, 11,
and most of
11,
the amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it? It's not 10. You see, most blokes, be playing at 10. You're on 10 here, all the way up, all the way up, all the way up. You're on 10 on your guitar. Where can you go from there? Where?
I don't know.
Nowhere, exactly. What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.